Greetings, digital world, and welcome back to another episode of Spliced In Later, where we have for you a movie review, an unexpected one to be sure. I think my frequent listeners, once they know what the movie is and what the theme and the general vibe of the film is, probably will also be surprised that I have gone to see this film in a cinema and am reviewing it to you now. It is not my usual status quo, but here we are. I guess at the end of the day, I ask so many people to come see movies with me, and I want to see about 60 films a year, that I do have to give in sometimes and go and see other films that other people want to see that I'm not particularly keen on. And 99% of the time, because of who I am and what I feel about movies, I end up absolutely loving them. So today we are reviewing a little movie called Last Night in Soho. Depending where you are in the world, this movie may have been out for a while. I think if you're listening to me here in Australia, and I think 99% of you are, it only came out last Thursday. And I don't know if people just don't know it exists, or they've seen posters and trailers and don't really know what it's about or whatever, so they aren't that particularly interested to go, as the theatre that I went to certainly was not a packed screening. It could be a majority of things. Maybe it's being overshadowed by the latest lockdown holding up releases. So Last Night in Soho is up against such big blockbuster films like No Time to Die and Shang-Chi and Eternals, which should have come out a lot earlier than this. And maybe it is that people are still a little scared to go back to the cinemas, which is completely understandable. We are living in unknown times, and a trip to the movie theatre, depending on the rules here in Australia about close and casual contact and quarantining, it is a risk every time you go into a theatre that you may end up not even just exposing yourself to the lovely coronavirus, but basically putting yourself in a position where you'll have to quarantine for 2 weeks. So it is risky. However, this is the only way to see Last Night in Soho. It is a theatre exclusive. Now, I didn't want to see Last Night in Soho because when I looked it up, when I heard it was coming, it said a psychological horror film, and I saw that horror word and my stomach immediately fell. Now, if you are a frequent listener to this show, you know what I'm talking about. If you're brand new, I like nearly every genre of film that there is, but I have a love-hate relationship with horror because I don't like to be scared. I'm not that person who goes looking to be shocked and startled and all that stuff. We are making progress though. I am allowing myself to see that there is two distinct horror styles, and there's one I don't like. And the one I don't like, I think most people who are into movies and horror films would agree, are the bare minimum for horror, and maybe not even horror. They're the notorious jump scare films. Films that focus on a very minimal plot, very little going on, and just rely on a spooky thing like a demon or a nun or a doll or a witch or wendigos or anything like that. But the basic scares of the film are just everybody hiding in dark shadows, and then loud, startling noises where the creatures will jump out at the scream and yell, and the music will bang and startle, so everybody goes, ugh. Now, that's not being scared. I've got into this in another episode much more clearly. If you ever want to know my full horror opinion, listen to my episode Get Out, which is a great episode, I think, and also a good recommendation for Get Out. But the basic point is, a jump scare is not scary, it is startling. And that's the thing I don't like. I don't like to be startled. It doesn't make me feel good. I don't enjoy the adrenaline you get. It makes me sick. And the idea of being jump scared over and over again chills me to my very core. I've seen the It movies in the cinemas with Pennywise the Clown, and I have a love-hate relationship with those movies because I like the film when it's being creepy and when it's focusing on the character development of the kids that are facing off against Pennywise. I don't like when the film every 20 minutes just has Pennywise shouting and screaming at you and throwing things and the music going bang, bang, bang to a point where you're going to have a heart attack. Today, now that I'm looking more into film and understanding what film is, there are many a horror film that I actually consider to be really great and that I really enjoy. The classic ones like The Shining, Rosemary's Baby, Halloween, even something as recent as Get Out or Doctor Sleep. Movies that rely on horror as a storytelling perspective, the creepy imagery, the unsettling stories, the things which can chill us to our core and make us scared, but not scared because, oh my god, what's going to jump out from behind that hedge? Is it a demon? Oh, it's a demon. Oh god, okay, I'm scared. All right, now we just got to sit and wait for the next thing to jump out and go boo. But I was looking at TV spots and trailers for Last Night in Soho, and while it looked interesting, I was a concern that what they were going to be talking about or doing could fall into the jump scare category. So I was a little concerned. But there are three things that won me over. One is what I mentioned earlier. A friend asked me to go see it. And I have to sometimes say yes when other people want to see movies. I can't just only say yes when I want to see movies. Number two, as I just said, I'm trying to give horror films a chance. I can't assume. There are some right off the bat. You know, you look at Annabelle Comes Home, or The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, or The Legend of La Llorona. Well, the movies which from the trailers you know immediately this is a jump scare festival. I'm not seeing that. Last Night in Soho, not so much. So I allowed myself to take a chance that this might be the type of horror film that I would enjoy. And three, this film is directed by Edgar Wright, and I love Edgar Wright as a director. I've done a whole episode on the Cornetto trilogy, which is a series of 3 films directed by Edgar Wright in collaboration with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. All 3 of those films are great. They're very separate genres. One is a horror comedy, the other is a buddy cop film, and the other is, I would say, a post-apocalyptic or an end-of-the-world type film. They're very funny, but they're very well directed and full of great character development and arcs and stories, which I can absolutely get behind. And even though each one feels different in terms of the genre, the Edgar Wright feel is still there for each one. And not just those ones. Edgar Wright directed Baby Driver, which is a very entertaining, gimmicksy type film where the story is set to the background of music, or even Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which is based on a comic book, but again, it is a very 2000s style movie, Edgar Wright style, with Michael Cera facing off against the 7 evil deadly exes, and it feels like you're watching a video game, or a video game come to life. So Edgar Wright at the moment has a 100% success rate for me for every film he's seen. So just because he's directing a horror film doesn't mean I won't enjoy it, I guess. So here we are. On the other side of it, I have seen Last Night in Soho. And what is my initial opinion? Do I like it? Do I hate it? Did I hate it because it was a horror film? Did I like it because it wasn't a horror film? I loved it. I thought it was great. There it is, shockingly. My end of year top 10 films are going to be interesting. I think we're getting into a rather contested spot at the end of the year. There's a couple of films that I've been looking forward to all year to see that I know will probably end up on my top 10 list. But then you see something like Last Night in Soho, which is a genuine surprise. And then when that gets on the list, you go, oh my God, okay. This list might look a lot different in a couple of days than what it has been for the last 3 or so months. So that's interesting. I will not classify this as a horror film as well. There's some creepiness to it. And yes, cards on the table, a couple of jump scares in here. But the jump scares are played in relation to the story. So you can see them coming, so you can prepare yourself for them. And they're not there just to get a cheap scare and pretend that they're a horror film because they've done it. It is in service to the atmosphere of the film and the story. But I would say this is more of a psychological thriller. It's sort of a mystery film. There's something going on. There's something that's driving our main character. There's an overarching mystery that she's trying to solve that is influencing her life as well and having an effect on her mind. And she's starting to lose her mind. At the end of the day, that is a thriller. That is a psychological thriller. It's not a horror film like she's being haunted by ghosts and demons. Maybe she is, maybe she isn't. We don't really know. It's more a reflection on her psyche and the effect that Soho is having on her. I'm getting ahead of myself. I want to give a brief explanation of what the film is so I can talk about it. But again, as what I normally do, I will avoid very much trying to get into spoilers. The basic plot of Last Night in Soho, very simply, Thomasin McKenzie plays a young girl called Ellie, probably the sweetest, loveliest, kindest girl you will ever see in cinema form. She lives out in the country. She's a country mouse. She has dreams of being a fashion designer. So she's eventually accepted into a very prestigious fashion school located in South London, or Soho. So she packs up, she leaves her grandma and her secluded life behind, and she moves in with these terrible, terrible people. Basically, all fashion students are terrible except for one, who I'll mention in a minute. She's sort of hit in the face with how intense Soho is, the people, the atmosphere, her coping is not doing very well. In an attempt to survive, she moves out of her dorms and she finds that she's able to rent a room above an old lady's house. The old lady played by Diana Rigg in one of her final performances before she passed away. If you don't know who Diana Rigg is, she was Tracy from On Her Majesty's Secret Service, one of the few Bond girls that got to James Bond, or probably more known, she was Olenna Tyrell, the Queen of Thorns on Game of Thrones. Badass, sassy grandma character. So she rents this room to get some peace, and then she discovers that when she goes to sleep at night, she suddenly finds herself observing but also kind of involved in traveling back in time to the 60s and following the life of a girl called Sandy, played by Anya Taylor-Joy. Sandy has also come to Soho. She's looking to make it big as a singer and a performer. She wants to break out and make a name for herself. So Ellie watches Sandy as she encounters Matt Smith, who plays a mysterious man who's involved in that world called Jack, watches their romance, watches Sandy start to get involved in the entertainment world of his Soho. What starts off as very glitz and glamoury then takes a very dark turn. Ellie also gets very sucked into this world that she is seeing. It's sort of hard to tell whether she is just an observer or if she is able to manipulate the events that is happening. You don't know if what she's watching is something that did happen in the 60s or if it's just some sort of vivid dream or imagination in her mind. But she becomes very connected to what's going on, especially when it starts to bleed out from just her nighttime adventures and it begins to have an impact on her in her fashion school, working at her job in a pub, simply walking the streets of Soho in a very, very intense, disturbing psychological way. And her attempts to figure out what's going on, try and survive with her sanity intact, is basically the plot of the film. And that's all I'll go into. This is a very good mystery though as to what is happening with Sandy and Jack and that connection between the two of them and how it is affecting Ellie and what she's seeing and the clues that are there is a very interesting and very entertaining mystery story. I think having seen the film, once I look back on it, I go, it's kind of obvious what the twists and the turns are, but I was so engaged in the movie that I was watching that I wasn't thinking that far ahead to take in every clue and try and solve the mystery of the story. I was just enraptured with the performances and the directing and the visual imagery and the intensity of the situation that I wasn't thinking about that. When everything comes together, it makes complete perfect sense. You understand. It ends in a way as well that is satisfactory. It's not one of those, oh, I don't know if things have ended particularly good or bad. It ends as the story should for a film like this. It is up to you, obviously, when you see it, to agree with me or not. But I hope and I believe people have the same thing. They'll be wrapped up in the performance and the story. They won't be thinking too much about what's actually happening. Can I solve it? I think I've got it. Oh, I know what they're going to do. That's not really the point. I can't really talk too much about the plot to say why I liked it. I will do what I normally do and focus on specific stuff. Firstly, of course, the direction of Edgar Wright. He does an incredible job here of the juxtaposition of Soho in the 1960s and Soho in the present day, and using music. The soundtrack in here is incredible. Like, I know the songs because I grew up with parents and they listen to 60s songs, but they have a different vibe in this film depending on what the mood of the movie is. When you hear that song, depends on how you appreciate it. I mean, Anya Taylor-Joy had to record 2 different tempos of the song Downtown, because when the song is played at different points in the film, the up tempo or the down tempo reflects very much on what is going on. Even in the scary moments though, the music is groovy, so you're still entertained, and it of course affects the endorphins in your brain to a point to make you react to the situation because of the songs. The colors as well, starting off from right at the start where the new apartment that Ellie moves into has a flashing neon light outside her room, which goes from red to blue to aqua, I think the herd color is. I don't care. That intense light looks cool, but it is also a reflection of psychological horror films of the past, I think. I've watched this internet show called Best of the Worst, or Review from Red Letter Media. They often talk about Italian horror films, those classy, old-timey Italian horror films, where the use of the color red specifically was a huge representation of horror, specifically in horror for insanity and mental disturbed and all of that stuff. So as Ellie goes close to the brink here in this film, that color red really becomes more and more prominent in the situation that she's in. I've never felt my emotions being all over the place more than watching this film, in terms of whether I should be having a big smile and enjoying the groove and the wonder of the 60s, or being disturbed and wanting to hide away and not look at what was going on in front of me. And the fact that these two types of feelings could switch seamlessly back and forth throughout this film, just incredible. Edgar Wright, truly, he's a great... I would have loved to have seen his Ant-Man film if he ever made that. I wonder if he will one day make a legitimate musical, not just music as a side piece for the story he's telling, like this or Baby Driver. If he made an actual musical, I think it would be insanely good. Maybe he has. I haven't seen every single Edgar Wright film. The acting here is fantastic. Of course, a highlight here is Thomasin McKenzie as Ellie. Anya Taylor-Joy is great as Sandy as well, but she's played more as a plot point in a story. She is the mystery, so we don't learn much about her except through the way Ellie learns about her. Indeed, if she's a real person or not, or what's going on there. She's great with her performances, when she's on stage, when she's suffering, when she's running around, all that stuff. But really, this is the Thomasin McKenzie show. If you're unfamiliar with her, I've only ever seen her in one other thing, Jojo Rabbit. She was great in that. I think she's fairly new to the acting world or the cinema world, especially big time, whatever. But she plays Ellie so sweet and innocently. She does really great at showing through facial reactions, or just the way she bounces off what's going on around her, whether it's feeling overwhelmed by how different Soho is to the country, or wonder at how things were like in the 60s and this place to escape, and then panic and fear and overwhelmingness when everything starts to get too much for her. But she never goes insanely crazy to a point where she starts doing things where you start to disconnect with her as a character. Everything she does, everything she reacts to, you connect with her 100%. You feel like in that situation, you would absolutely be in the same situation. I think I would be worse. I'd probably lose my mind way faster than she did in this film. She was absolutely wonderful to watch, and I loved it. And the supporting cast, I mean, it's really Thomasin McKenzie and then Anya Taylor-Joy, and then to an extent Matt Smith. Matt Smith is also a mysterious character from the 60s, so you only learn as much about him as Ellie does. But it is unsettling to see Matt Smith, who played such a joculant doctor from Doctor Who, playing this shifty, maybe sinister character. Once you learn what he's doing, it really shifts your perception of him. It's unsettling to watch. So it's good to see that someone cannot be typecast, essentially, is what I'm saying there. Diana Grigg is great in her supporting role. Terrence Stamp shows up here for a mysterious supporting role as well. They're great. My favorite supporting player, though, in here is, I don't remember the actor's name, but he played John. John is a fellow fashion student with Ellie in modern-day Soho, and he is just also the sweetest, kindest, nicest person in the whole film. He is set up as someone who can relate to Ellie, who sees that she's in trouble or sees that she is a misfit like himself, and very patiently tries to break through her armor to become friends of her, and then to proceed further than that, do all that stuff. But he does not have anything sinister going on, and it's very, very clear watching him. There is nothing sinister about him. He is very, what you see is what you get. He is pure, he is kind, and he just wants to help people, which means you will spend the movie worried intensely that something terrible is going to happen to John. I was more worried that John would suffer a terrible fate in this film than I was any other character, and that is a testament to how relatable or just nice in a world where you've got fashion students that are persecuting Ellie and a 1960s Soho that is more seedier and disgusting than you would like it to be. Having someone pure like John in the mix was just wonderful, and I thought it was great. Really, overall, Last Night in Soho is a very pleasant and wonderful surprise. I really liked it, and I thought I would enjoy it. It's very hard for me to not like a film, as if I appreciated horror films when they don't become jump scare fests. But I'm surprised at how much I not only enjoyed it, but how it has stuck with me, how I'm still thinking about it, even though it's been a couple of days since I've seen it, how much I appreciate the acting, the direction, the atmosphere, the feelings that I had watching the film. I'm looking forward to a rewatch to see what it's like when you know the twists and turns that are coming. But suffice it to say, if you have a chance, go and see Last Night in Soho. It is in the cinemas. I don't know for how long. We've got Spider-Man and Ghostbusters and another Disney film and The Matrix, all these things that are waiting to hit us in Christmas. So it is possible that this film will disappear. It will become harder to see. It may only end up having like one session a day. It only has 2 sessions a day at the moment. And because it is not on streaming, it's not easy for you to just go, well, I'll just pop it on at home. It definitely is worth seeing. It's worth seeing in the cinemas. And if you're worried about a packed theater and catching COVID, you probably won't with Soho because not too many people are seeing it. But it definitely needs to be seen. So I recommend it to everybody listening. It gets a 9 out of 10 from me, which is extremely high and unexpected for a film I had no interest in seeing and was not even on my radar. There you go. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this review. I've enjoyed talking about it, that's for sure. I will be back next week with another review. I am going to an advanced screening of the new Disney animated film Encanto on Sunday, which I'm hearing very good things about. I really like the music made by Lin-Manuel Miranda, so I know he's making music for this, which is great. It's more of a musical, unlike the last Disney film Raya, which is good because I enjoy Disney musicals. And I'm interested to see what it's about because I've avoided every trailer, every description of the film. I've got no idea, so it should be an interesting experience. So I cannot wait next week to sit down and talk to you about that one. But until then, I love and appreciate you all as always. Stay safe and kind to one another. And if you get a chance, do go see Last Night in Soho. Otherwise, you've been spliced in later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.